Hello, everyone. Welcome to Collaborative Edges, conversations to inspire collaborative initiatives across languages and cultures. I am Rocío Quispe-Agnoli, Professor of Hispanic Studies at Michigan State University and the host of Collaborative Edges. Today, we will talk about African arts and photography with Malick Sitou, Youssouf Sakaly, and Candace Keller, Associate Professor of African Art History and Visual Culture at Michigan State University. Welcome.
Thank you.
The West African country of Mali has long been home to a creative community of photographers. An exhibit that opened last night at the Michigan State University Museum explores the works of 5 Malian photographers whose works document the region's transition from colonial French Africa to the independent nation of Mali. I would like to start the conversation by posing a question to all our guests today. Would you please introduce yourself, state your name and your primary connection to the project, Malick?
Yeah, my name is Malick Sitou. I'm the son of one of the sons of Tidjani Sitou, a photographer who's having one of his works, in the exhibition that started yesterday. So I live here in Connecticut, in the United States.
Okay, thank you. Youssouf?
Youssouf Sakaly, I'm the son of Abdurrahman Sakaly, one of the 5 photographers concerned by this project. I'm also the local project manager in Bamako for the MAP project. And yes, here today, for the launch and the exhibition in MSU. Very, very happy for that.
I'm Candace Keller. I'm the director for the Archive of Malian Photography.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I would like to know from all of you, how did the Archive of Malian Photography develop, and what was your role, each of your roles in this development?
Okay, so as a local project manager, I have a double, role. My first role as a son is, to be sure the archive of my family will be treated in the good way through this project and rehoused and put in digital version so that we can have this archive as long as possible with us. It's a matter of maintaining this archive for long years again. And as a local project manager, my role is to also, to be here for all the communication around the project on the ground, and to assure that, quality on the ground is respected, and also to manage the team locally in general.
Okay, thank you. Malick, what about you?
Yeah, as a primary custodian of my father's archives. So when I met Professor Candace Keller in 2004 in Bamako in Mali, and we were introduced to each other by Malick Sitou, who passed away last year. And when she visited our home and our father's studio, and she saw, how our negatives were stored, they were not properly done, not just our father's works, but so many other Malian photographers as well that she had the opportunity to work with. And then she encouraged us and told us the benefit of getting them digitized archives, and with the possibility of getting them, reaching a bigger audience as well, having, make it accessible, to the wild world if, we go through that path. And that's why I became involved in this project.
Okay, that's so important to create these archives and to make them visible in general. Candice?
So this project, as Malick Sitou mentioned, I've been conducting research on the histories of photographic practice in Mali since 2001, and in the process, I've worked with over 100 photographers in the archives and the archival custodians. And the 3 main issues that were brought to my attention from these families, or sometimes the photographers themselves, was the physical preservation was a concern because of flooding, because of heat, because of dust and other issues. many had been lost already, some of the earliest collections, and then because they're private archives, they're not accessible to local audiences, let alone international audiences. And with the popularity of Sitou Keita and Malick Sitou, for example, it was important to tell the stories of other important photographers and to contextualize those works so that there wasn't sort of a false narrative about these histories. And then the third thing was that because in the 1990s, commercial photography became popular in international art markets with the rise, for example, of Malick Sitou and Sitou Keita in popularity, some unscrupulous dealers, collectors, and even scholars would try to locate other archives and collections to launch them into the international sphere. And they would say things like, well, you don't have the means locally to print large scale. We want to have an exhibition of your father's work somewhere in Europe. So we need to, quote unquote, borrow the negatives so that we can do this, and we will invite you to the opening, at which point we'll return the negatives to you. And the exhibitions happened. Photographs were sold, publications happened. In some cases, these ended up in journals. In one case, on the cover of African Arts, for example, and in other cases, there are calendars, there's websites offering these things for sale. But the families were not invited. They did not, in many cases, were not able to reclaim their negatives. And so it's an issue of exploitation and theft, much like the concern we have for Gene-Geno terracottas in Mali or Timbuktu manuscripts. And so we wanted to try to address cultural heritage preservation, global accessibility, and the physical preservation of the archives themselves.
Yes. Building these archives and making them accessible, and especially to preserve all many features of the region and the nation. It's so important. It resonates a lot with what is happening with indigenous photographers of South America, which is what my own area of interest. And all what you are saying, there are so many similarities. Candice, what photographers' archives have been included in the project at this point?
So we have representatives from 3 different cities in Mali. So that's Bamako, the capital city, Ségou, and Mopti. And those are Mamadou Cissé, Abderrahmane Sakaly, Tidjani Sitou, Malick Sitou, and Adama Kouyaté.
Okay. And when were these photographs taken, the time frame, the timeline, and what do they depict, if we can say, of general topics or...
Sure. So there are actually 3 different generations of photographers within this collection. So the earliest started working in the 1940s, and that would be Mamadou Cissé, and all the way up through today, actually, the 21st century in the case of Malick Sitou, for example, and Adama Kouyaté also. So covers several decades and periods from the colonial period, and some of these photographers work for the colonial government, the transition to independence and a national government in 1960, and some of these photographers worked also for the national government. And then through a socialist government, through democracy, through all sorts of moments, political and cultural transitions. By and large, there's a lot of portraiture in here. So moments documenting important times in people's lives when they get married, when they have their first child, celebrating national or religious holidays. But these photographers also, as I said, took documentary photos for the state. They took them out of their own interest. They took art photography for themselves. They worked for insurance companies, in some cases the police and that sort of thing. So quite diverse, sometimes going out into rural areas and also urban. So this archive is vast, and even though it's 100,000 negatives, in the case of Abderrahmane Sakaly, his collection is 300,000 negatives. So it's a fraction, but an important fraction, and we tried to capture a range over a photographer's lifetime or oeuvre so that you can see how things changed and capture different moments in time.
Mm-hmm. I have a question. out of curiosity, because I saw the photo exhibit yesterday at the museum, and I saw at least 2 photographs taken in the studio, and the subject, the individual, is posing with a motorcycle. And that caught my attention. There are others that they are posing with a radio, And then I thought immediately, okay, modern technology. And that catches my attention because the indigenous photographers of early 20th century Peru, they also made these photographs for the indigenous people, or mestizo people. They would come to the studio and they wanted to have their photographs taken like riding on a motorcycle. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to know if any of you can tell me a little bit about that, because I said, okay, this is an amazing coincidence of the topic,
We can assume that this was a cultural trend globally. Yeah. So maybe at the same time, motorcycle was very prominent as a prop or something to own in West Africa. The same thing was happening in Latin America. So it could be, maybe it was a very, it also shows your status. So being able to afford it, it means you have the money first. And it is maybe the new iPhone we always be craving these days. Maybe in those days, having, it makes you more popular as well within your own, vicinity where you live as well. That's my own take on it.
I think it's okay. Yes, it's exactly what I mean. Also, it's your status, it's your way of living, and you want people to know it. You want people to keep it in mind. So I think these are some habits that have disappeared today. It's not like we are keen to go with our object and to take some specific picture, in the studio. So. Yeah, I'm just looking at this and trying to understand also always. I think there is many things to say about it, Exactly.
Yeah, I would say access to modern technology to show how urban your identity is, and a lot of these things, so a motorcycle, but also a radio, like a watch, could show modernity, but it also shows connectivity to global realities and an awareness because of the news and accessibility, and that you're cosmopolitan and plugged in. Oftentimes today you see pictures of Africans that seem, in a Western context, that they're depraved or isolated or not contemporaneously engaged with political or cultural trends and realities. But these show you exactly, if Michael Jackson was popular in 1986, the Thriller in San Diego, where I grew up, in your father's studio, Malick, there's a man who's wearing a Thriller shirt and dancing like Michael Jackson. So it just shows how interconnected and with the times and cosmopolitan awareness was there. And sometimes these were people's possessions, and so they would want to record that. But other times it was an aspiration, and so the photographers knew that these were important things, and so they would have them as props. So sometimes it was the photographer's car that people were taking pictures with. Sometimes it was the photographer's motorcycle or a radio or a phone. So the photographers played a role in enabling people to portray their aspirations as well as record their realities.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to ask Malick and Youssouf, what are the primary concerns for custodians of photographic archives in Mali today? What are the obstacles or the challenges you encounter as custodians of these archives?
I would say, this project came at the right time. There could be no better time. So preservation of the negatives was the top of the list, be able to preserve them. And another thing was also, giving the power, the ownership of our own copyright. It was a big deal. Most of the time, before these kind of projects ever, happened to us, we had people that come, collectors that come there. They have more ownership on the negatives they collect than the photographers themselves. So not only that we're able to preserve what we have, but this project also allows us to have the ownership on the copyright. And it will also allows us to reach a very bigger audience, which all those three steps I just mentioned we could have never be able to do in the past. So those are some concerns that are being taken care of right now. So we hope that this will also continue and spread to other photographers that didn't have we have 5 photographers in this project. Hopefully, it will be more expansion of this project to reach other photographers as well, that make them known, be able to preserve, their works and, give them the ownership on their copyright as well.
Mm-hmm. Youssouf?
Yeah, multi-goals, in fact, are achieved through this project, And adding to what Malick says, for sure, there is preservation, there is ownership, there is also diffusion to the audience. But in general, what I can say is that to have a control on our archives. I mean, this is my point. I mean, before this project, it's like this archive that really doesn't know how to deal with. But now we have a better idea about this, and we gain the control on it. We gain kind of vision about it.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to say some challenges that remain are the air conditioning, the climatization of the archives, because for sustainability, it costs money, and it's another thing that we're working on, trying to address moving forward to maintain the preservation of the physical archives through air conditioning environments. But then also there are national archives. So these are private studio archives, but there are national archives that are equally vulnerable physically. They're not stored in the best climatic conditions. They're not stored in archival safe materials. They're not well cataloged. And so we'd like to include those because they tell important aspects of the history of Mali and cultural heritage, and would be really important resources for education and scholarship, both for people in Mali and then also people working around the globe. So these are some areas we're hoping, in addition to augmenting, as Malick said, the project with other studio archives, also national archives, and then the issue of air conditioning.
And Youssouf, how do you foresee all this project as in terms of long-term benefits?
When you have your archives for a longer term, I mean, already you have the proof of an activity for a while, and this is important for us because what was occurring before is, as Malick told once, is people coming from overseas and taking the physical archive, going with it, and you lose completely the control on it. Now we are not obliged to give a physical archive. We can work with a digital archive. Digital archive is now enough for everything, every kind of purpose now in terms of commercialization. And this allows us family, to see, to have more perspective about our archives, And of course, in terms of future, we have also to finalize the project because, there is many archive left and there is over photograph that are concerned also by the project. So we have to work on that also. So this means, I think many things has been done, but there is a lot to be done yet, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And what are the plans for the project moving forward?
We, like Professor Candace mentioned, both private archives being preserved and national archives as well being preserved is part of the plan to extend it to a bigger number. But I'm also hoping and wishing that this will be the beginning of something that will also, give us more power to go after, legally after some other collectors that have illicitly exploited some of the works we have. So once we have this one in place, so we'll be able to collect more that are outside that we don't have control on, and some that have been, illicitly exploited. So from now on, it's going to be another, step layer to add it to this project as well. And we're all working, behind the doors, planning on.
Okay. And Youssouf, would you like to add something?
Yes, this aspect is very important. Now we have, now to know exactly what is inside this archive, without giving to our people. This allows us, to monitorize a little bit better, what is happening overseas about this kind of archive, and this wasn't possible before. It's very important for us now to be aware of what's happening yesterday through these archives,
Yes, so awareness raising is one part of it. Preserving more archives is another. I think immediately also we're working on a large exhibition, sort of a retrospective exhibition with 125 images, a catalog publication, because there are some literature that's been published about this history, but by and large, there are sort of narratives that have been created for commercial purposes that maybe make it seem like only one photographer was doing some sort of thing. Like there was one photographer as a state photographer, when in actuality there were several. And so this collection can challenge that narrative, or at least speak to that narrative, to contextualize the histories and show how important these different photographers were, to speak to even Western narratives about Africa, to change people's understanding of histories and transcultural relations between Africa and the West, but then also raise awareness and contribute to the canon of photography globally, so that you don't just compare a Malian photographer to Auger or Auguste Sander, but you can recognize the individuality of the artist and what they bring to international aesthetics and photography, and ways of working with the technology that is new and at the same time familiar, so we can learn from these cultures and these histories, and not just as Westerners feel that we have everything to share and nothing to learn from others.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to conclude this conversation with a big thank you for all of you to be here today with us. Youssouf Sakaly, project manager of the Archive of Malian Photography in Bamako, Mali, and Malick Sitou, photographer and son of Tijani Sitou. The exhibit at the MSU Museum that opened yesterday is open until when?
October 2018.
Okay. And if you wish to learn more, you can visit the site of the Archive of Malian Photography at amp.matrix.msu.edu. So thank you very much for being here today. A pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Letters, any of our sponsors, or any official entities at Michigan State University. I want to thank our guests again, and our technical producer, Daniel Trego. Tune in for our next podcast on collaborative edges, and we'll see you next time.